Hey all, here at OS Reviews. Today we're taking a quick look at the Tabuta MasterPad E100. Despite the pretty ambitious name, make no mistake, this is a budget entry-level Android tablet that often goes on sale for around $65. So it's going to compete with other models including Amazon's Fire series. Now as far as specs are concerned, we are looking at a 10.1-inch display, which at the very least is a full HD 1080p resolution. That's a little bit hard to come across at this price. A lot of the other $50 to $60 tablets will tend to use 720p. The design doesn't look shabby either. The bezels aren't invisible, but it is relatively slim for a entry-level device. Also has a aluminum back as well, so the build quality should be a little better than expected. With that being said, we are still talking about a quad-core MediaTek processor coupled with just 2 GB of RAM, so don't expect lightning-fast performance. We'll talk about that more later on in this video, and that's part of the reason why they've selected Android Go Edition as the operating system. It is using dual-band Wi-Fi at the very least, and a 6,000 mAh capacity battery is rated to last upwards of 8 hours on a full charge, which is also decent. Box is actually presented pretty artistically, and this is also eco-friendly. Everything is made of this cardboard texture, so this can be recycled when you're done, and we have just the specs reiterated again on the rear. Now inside we'll have a quick user guide along with just a USB Type-C charging and data cable, along with also a wall adapter is included. Taking a closer look at the design of the tablet, as aforementioned, based on the aesthetics, you wouldn't be able to tell just how affordable this model is. The bezels for the most part aren't too obtrusive and still makes it easy enough to hold the device. It is looking pretty decent in terms of the overall sharpness as well as the kind of contrast for an IPS LCD screen. This is definitely not a laminated display because of the cost, so the gap between the glass on the top and the actual screen underneath is definitely visible. In fact, it is a pretty wide gap, which means that it's easy to glare, and if you are looking at it with a lot of sunlight hitting on it, it becomes much more reflective. If you're in a relatively darker environment or indoors, it doesn't pose too big of an issue. Now on the very top here, we do have a front-facing camera for video chatting. Edge of the tablet houses a microphone, and on the very top we do have the micro SD card slot for expanding the memory, USB Type-C for charging. The bottom houses the stereo speakers, which is a nice touch, and then finally on the other side we do have access to a 3.5mm headphone jack, always great to see, and a volume rocker as well as a power key. Now these buttons, by the way, are made out of plastic, so they're not metal, but they still feel pretty clicky and responsive to use. Finally, on the very back here, we do have access to the rear-facing camera, which has a LED flash, not something that all the tablets will have, so you can still illuminate things like documents in the dark. Some of the ports here are labeled, and the top and bottom strips here are made out of plastic to help with the antenna reception, but the actual backplate is made out of aluminum alloy and metal. So again, that's a surprise, I would say, at this price, since all the Amazon Fire tablets would be made out of plastic, along with many other competitors. The metal here kind of wraps around even on the edge of the two spines, so as you're holding it, it's kind of cold to the touch. Maybe it doesn't feel quite as polished in terms of fit and finish as something like an iPad or a true flagship, but I appreciate they're trying to make it feel a little more polished. So anyways, we can see that, as aforementioned, the operating system is Android 11 Go Edition, which for the most part is pretty up to date, and you're able to take a look at navigating things around, which you can turn on gesture navigation mode, so everything can rely on just swipes. No issues in terms of the touch responsiveness, at least. The quad-core processor here from MediaTek is pretty much the same one that's been used for quite a number of years now on other low-cost Android devices, and it's starting to show its age, clocked at 1.3 GHz, so don't expect the fastest animations. In fact, sometimes there'll be some choppiness, and also when you're loading up apps in general, you have to wait kind of a second or two longer for them to open up. Specifically, you have around 26 gigs of built-in storage, which is remaining out of the 32 gigs when you first open up the tablet, and the rest you can occupy with your favorite apps and programs, which you can also supplement, as aforementioned, via a micro SD card. So glad to see that at least it's not 16 gigabytes like other budget models have been in the past. Now let's jump into things like the web browsing performance first. It's going to be one of the main applications I think folks will use this for, and like I said, you have to wait just a little longer for things to load, but once they do open, it works alright, generally speaking. I can tap on a page. Amazon here again, you have to just wait for a few more seconds, but afterwards the entire page will load. It's a desktop version of the site. You can definitely notice some moments of choppiness and hesitation, but like I said, text at the least does look reasonably sharp because of the 1080p display, and you can definitely scroll around. Pinch to zoom multi-touch does work, but you have to sometimes kind of be aware of moments of choppiness, but for the most part it definitely is usable. Again, 2 gigabytes of RAM, you're not going to be doing too much multitasking on this thing, and you have to just, I would say, open up less than 5 tabs would be recommended in the browser at once before things will start to reload and re-render again, but you can definitely still get you by with doing a bit of document reading here and there. The Verge is a pretty complex page with lots of videos and ads, and again, just being a little bit more patient, everything will eventually load, and does look, like I said, pretty good in terms of at least the colors and the sharpness on the display. So this is definitely good enough, I would say, for just reading back some news documents, articles, searching something on the web. In terms of background programs, if you're done with something, I would recommend closing out of it to preserve on the memory, and then open up something again to get the best effect. It is a very clean version of Android with just the essentials, including the Go edition of Search, Gmail, YouTube, Maps, Drive are all included on here, and that's pretty much it. We have just the assistant, there is a voice recorder built on in that you can use the microphone to do some quick memos, as well as a video player app, and of course the Play Store. But aside from that, pretty much everything else is just completely stock, and you can fill up with the programs that you actually need. So here's just a closer look at, again, some of those built-in utility tools, and you can definitely notice, like I said here, the moments of hesitation. Definitely not the smoothest experience in the world. So here we are, playing back this YouTube video, 1080p resolution, and cranking up the volume of the speakers here. Alright, so some takeaways being that the speaker quality isn't shabby for a super budget tablet. It's not going to give you the most richness in terms of bass, but at least it is stereo. I would have liked to see maybe one on the other end to give you better separation, but overall it's average. Now the overall video watching experience is also a little better than expected, in the sense that at least YouTube videos, Netflix, things like that do load back relatively quickly. You might still have to wait a second or two for them to play initially, but once the playback starts going along, I'm not seeing too many issues in terms of just continuing to load and stream, which is good. We'll get you by for just some simple entertainment and multimedia purposes. What is worth pointing out though is the tablet does get a little bit warm on the bottom right hand portion as you are using it for more than, let's say, an hour. It never gets too hot or uncomfortable, but things like just browsing the web, watching videos, it does build up a little bit of heat. So definitely this is not the newest processor, and it's kind of showing the fact that it's maybe not the most energy efficient in the world. Granted, I was still able to get around 6 hours of usage out of this with medium brightness level and just browsing the web, so that's acceptable again, I think, for a tablet in this size and price bracket. And here is the kind of Google app, which again, using Android Go edition, it's also a little bit more optimized, so you have to usually just tap on that to begin the search, as well as some other web apps, which are just basically the website versions of those pages, slightly more optimized on here. And there's also a Discover tab that you can swipe over on the edge once you're in the Google app to take a look at your news feed. A tab over here on the right also will give you some additional web favorites, so some of these can be just easily jumped into as you are kind of navigating along. Including, by the way, a section dedicated for social media as well as games. So these are all going to be web games that will not require you to actually download the program on your device. Instead, it opens up the web page as long as you have a good enough internet connection and you can play these back. Here we have Stack, and this is a pretty classic as well as just very basic game that you're trying to stack this cube as high as possible. You saw the lag there when I tapped. The cube only went down and fell moments later. So you get the idea here in terms of the performance. Definitely not going to be something super ideal for serious gaming, but for lighter titles, things like 2D animation games, Fruit Ninja, Angry Birds, things like that, it can still get you by. In this regard, I would say if you are looking for something with more horsepower, I would actually recommend the Amazon Fire tablets, since those do seem to give you a little bit more performance in that sense, but that's also not necessarily a gaming tablet at the end of the day. And if you do want something, again, for PUBG or more kind of AAA style games, you should definitely look elsewhere, and you would have to probably spend a little bit more. So that is more or less it as far as our hands-on review of the Tabuta MasterPad E100. Again, this is just a super rock-bottom entry-level tablet, which in some regards, I do think it's working well, such as the fact that it's running on a relatively recent version of Android. And for things like just watching back quick videos, the screen looks sharp enough, as well as doing some light web browsing, it will definitely get you by. Same thing goes with reading back, let's say, some quick PDFs or any documents. That can be another application which it's adequate for. However, the processor, I would say, is definitely one of the limiting factors here, just because of how entry level it is. It just doesn't feel the snappiest or fastest, but still, as long as you are keeping your expectations modest, after using it for a while, you'll get used to it, and it's not overall crippling for just simple basic tasks. But again, if you're doing things like gaming, that's definitely an area where this is not going to get you the best experience. So you can check out more details if you're interested, but for now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews.